12-0? It's definitely within reach now.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Lars Hanson, we said it in the opener. Washington is 2 games away from being 12-0. Can they do it?
You know, even though I keep saying that this team has a loss in them, I think it, in a way, it's like they should have a loss in them, but they won't. I think that's kind of where I'm at, right? Where not that they should lose to Boise State. They should lose to Oregon State, but they could, right? They certainly could lose to Oregon State as a top 10 matchup. I don't think they could lose to Washington State. They certainly should not lose to Washington State, but they also could have lost to Oregon. They could have lost a number of games this season. And I think at this point, this team is so resilient. The way the mindset has, the health for the most part is as good as it's going to be, aside from, the ones we've already known, Turner, J-Max getting healthier.
Banks, yeah.
Right. Aside from the obvious ones, right? For the most part, there's no new injuries, right? This team is not getting sick. They're not stacking up injuries as the season goes along. So there's no reason why they shouldn't finish 12-0. It's just a matter of will they. I think this team, and that's what they all came back for. So I think that's what gives me faith that this team will be 12-0, even though I thought they'd be 11-1.
So I also thought they were going to be 11-1. I think it's definitely in the cards, but you can't overlook this boy. You did it to me. This Oregon State game. It's going to be a really tough environment. We're going to talk a little bit later on too about just the biggest challenges that the team is going to face in that game, because Oregon State runs the ball really well. There might be a little bit of weather, so we'll definitely get into some of those things too. But it's amazing to talk about that this team is at this point, because they really have overcome a lot. And with some of the games they faced, you see it all over Twitter these days, where it's, oh, well, Washington should be 6-4. Washington should be this. You see all these Oregon fans, oh, Oregon beat themselves in that game. It doesn't matter at this point anymore. Like, you can say whatever you will. You can play revisionist history time and time again, but it doesn't matter anymore. Washington is 10-0. They are still fighting. And as we were recording this before the college football playoff rankings, we're going to do another live reaction later tonight to kind of discuss the college football playoff. But until that happens, you can't, and until Washington actually does lose a game, which has not happened yet, you can't say, oh, well, this should happen, that should happen. No, you have to just think about the reality of the situation, that Washington has beaten 3 ranked teams. They played some clunkers, like basically everybody has, but they found ways to win those clunkers, which is something that in previous years you could not say about this team. So it's absolutely within the cards, and I feel like that all just kind of stems from the coaching staff, because the players, obviously, they do a great job of all this, but it all starts with the coaching staff, and it all starts with Kalen DeBoer and his culture and his mindset and everything that he's infused into this team.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of the ironic, and I think this will also be it's an almost easy litmus test, I think, because with all the potential rumors and coaching vacancies and openings, oh, well, will Kalen get plucked? Will Washington extend him? If they have 2 significant wins back-to-back against Oregon State and Washington State, again, first of all, beat Oregon State by 1 or 20, it doesn't matter. But I think if you can win convincingly, let's say it's, and I'm not going out on, or this is not my score prediction for the game, just to be clear, but let's say it's like, 45-20, right? Or like, a significant margin of game where it's like, wow, like Washington really showed up. Like that was the Michigan State offense. That was what we saw early on in the season. They're at that point against the top 10 team. Kalen must be focused and locked in. the more you have those close games, and it's like, let's say Oregon State goes up at halftime 21-17 or 21-14, it's like, ooh, Washington keeps getting tested. Is Kalen like halfway out the door? Is Ryan Grubb halfway out the door? That's where all that starts to come into play, where whether it's true or not, the outside noise, and again, coaches will say they don't listen to the outside noise. They do. Like they won't talk about it. They won't use it as bulletin board material, but everybody knows. Everybody listens. It's 2023. Absolutely. We all got internet, so they don't know that it's not being said. But again, it's more or less than how do you respond to that, right? If you beat Oregon State convincingly, you blow out Washington State as you should, and whether you squeak by Oregon or not, again, if you beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, you've beaten Oregon twice, you're going to the college football playoff. Like that, if you do what you have to do, and by the way, Washington has done that this year. And not every Chris Peterson can do that a lot of times. They didn't do it last year in DeBoer when lost to Oregon, UCLA, and
Arizona State and UCLA.
Yeah. Where they put themselves in this position. Don't ruin all the good work you put in now in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season, because if you lose against Oregon State and then you lose to Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, you went from not only not getting the playoffs, you're probably back to the Alamo Bowl, which like it's still awesome, but it feels like it will be so
it's not the same.
Underwhelming. It will be so like no bowl outside of a New Year's Six is going to be good enough, right? It's like if you're 11-1 and you beat Oregon, but you lost to Oregon State and you get left out of the playoffs. Okay, you go to the Cotton Bowl, go to whatever other bowl that it is, and beat another top 20 team, top 15, maybe even top 10 team. That it's a happy. It's not the best result because this team should still be playing for a national championship, arguably, but it's at least acceptable. Okay, there's marginal. We went from 10 wins to 11 in the regular season with 12 in the bowl game. You know, you're there, right? You're incrementally improving. Otherwise, it becomes, can Kalen get over the hump? Can they close out? Can they? That's where the narrative, and it's all in their hands right now.
So you're absolutely right, but I feel like one thing that we should really talk about when it comes to this stretch is something that we talked about a little bit on yesterday's show too, and that's the Jalen McMillan factor. How much is he going to play? How much is he actually going to contribute in terms of targets and catches and all that? That's yet to be seen. But the fact that as of right now, he is healthy enough to play and have that increased workload, that's really, really big for this team. Because we haven't seen the full Washington offense since the Michigan State game, really. And because you can talk about Jalen McMillan missing a couple games, coming back against Oregon, coming back against Stanford, but since that game, since Washington's trip to East Lansing, we haven't seen the full complement of Washington's wide receiver core, which Lars, you and I talked about being the best in the country before the season started. And even as the season has gone along, they seem to have proven why we had that discussion. Because even without Jalen McMillan, Michael Penix is still the leading passer. There are still so many extra things to just say, oh yeah, look at all these plays they're making for him. Look at Jalen Polk. You and I were just talking about it before the show, just how many fantastic grabs he makes week in and week out. Odunze should be the favorite for the Biletnikoff Award, and we'll talk more about that in the final segment of the show. But I think that there's just so much that this team kind of still has left in the tank, because and this the last point I'll make on this, because I feel like we're just kind of rehashing a whole lot of topics that the everydayers are also familiar with at this point. But the last thing is, there still feels like there's so much left to achieve, like you just talked about, where the Alamo Bowl or even a Fiesta Bowl, something like that, still feels like it's oh man, like, yeah, this is cool, but there's more that can be desired from this, and more that, feels like it's left to achieve. And it's definitely possible, but you're right. The first half against Oregon State is going to be very telling of just kind of what's going to come next in the course of the season. And speaking of Oregon State, we are going to talk about some of the biggest challenges in that game. But first, we're going to give a shout out to our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophies, also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right. Biggest challenge against Oregon State. What do you got for me?
So I'm going to throw out a crazy stat for you. Can you count the number of times in a full season Oregon State has lost at Reser Stadium since 21?
So out of like the 6-7 games they play there a year?
Yeah. So since 2021, including 21, 2, and this year, how many of those games at home have they lost?
I'm going to go with 1.
Yeah. And nice. Crazy enough, it was to a 12th ranked USC. So, and now you have to go back all the way to 2019 to when they lost multiple games at home. And that was one of which was to Washington. That was a 19-7 game for Washington and 52-7 against Utah. The point of what I'm getting at is if this game was in Seattle, I would feel a lot more confident. And I think Going back to your preseason prediction, it's like the fact that the game is at Reser and Oregon State has done what they needed to do to put themselves in a position where they're a top 10 team in the country, and legitimately so. Like,
I'm sorry, I have to say one thing on this real fast because it plays exactly off of what you're saying. That's exactly what I told you was going to happen at this point in the season. I had to put that out into the world, but no, please continue.
No, it's okay. We'll revisit the Jalen Polk point in a minute. But no, I'm just kidding. But Jonathan Smith is probably one of the more underrated and underappreciated coaches when it comes to national perception for what he's done at Oregon State. I mean, it was the perfect hire, and Oregon State has given him the exact leash to build the roster and to build the program up the right way. It's been slow, right, in terms of it wasn't Kalen DeBoer just showing up and winning 10 games. But now he's gotten to a point where he's able to bring DJ Uiagalelei, who was thrown away at Clemson. Everybody blamed him for the reason Clemson struggled last year. And now he's leading Oregon State with relatively, in comparison, nothing, right? I mean, he's got a lot. I'm not saying Oregon's nothing.
Oh, absolutely. Nothing. That offensive line is so good, man. But
the talent at Clemson, right? If you were to tell somebody, hey, DJ went to Oregon State and ended up being better than what Clemson has with Cade Klubnik, much like Lincoln Riley saying, had I told you Washington would have won a game at home and not had an offensive touchdown, you wouldn't believe me. And almost rightly so, right? And so it's a testament to what Jonathan Smith and that whole staff have done. A couple of Washington ties, I believe, or in some regard on that staff. But this is a game where if Oregon State can gash Washington in the run game, it might be a wrap. And that's just because the way that Oregon State knows how to control the clock and Washington has been susceptible to that, with or without, I mean, the offense basically, when you play that game, you have to score a touchdown on every possession because you have to match the score if your defense is getting gashed. I'm not saying the defense will get gashed, but just like Oregon, this is one where yards are going to be had. It's a matter of, can you force Oregon State to kick instead of give up 7? And looking back at that Utah game, it still scares me because DJ's ability to run, Damian Martinez's ability to carry the ball, a 2-yard check down turns into an easy 60-yard touchdown for Utah. It certainly will for Oregon State.
No, you're absolutely right, because that's the number one thing that I wanted to make sure that we talked about was that running game and what they're able to do, because they also have a big leg up on Oregon State does on Utah in terms of what they can do throwing the ball. But I think that one of the things that I would say can be concerning is the weather. There's a chance of rain, and we can see how that like really impacts the offense down there. But I think that Washington and Oregon State match up really, really well. Washington's defensive line is still really solid, and especially with Tuligasanoa feeling healthy, that's going to be really huge on the interior of the defensive line. But my biggest question is going to be, because we saw Washington stop the run at times, right? Like even with Utah's rushing attack, and they rush for more yards per game than Oregon State does, where obviously they run the ball a lot more too. But I think that one of the things that we really need to kind of keep in mind here is the tackling. The tackling is going to be the biggest thing in this game. Can you present just prevent those yards after contact? Can you make sure that you're getting Damian Martinez on the ground when you get your hands on him and not letting him escape and pick up an extra 2-3 yards, whatever it is, because that's what's going to kill the drive. And I think if Washington is able to do that, then they're going to have a good shot at winning this game. But there are so many ways for Oregon State to keep this game close. Their offensive line is really, really good. There's going to be a time where they push Washington off their spot. But I think that on the other side of the ball, Washington's offensive line can also do that against Oregon State's defensive line, where they're really talented, but they're so much lighter than what Washington shows up front. And if they can get that major push, I think that it could be a big day for Dillon Johnson, where you can almost look at that as kind of an equalizer. And if it comes down to which offense is going to throw the ball a little bit better, I would give Washington that leg up, obviously, for a couple of reasons. But it's still the matchups here are so interesting, and it's really like with Oregon State and everything else that's happening down there in terms of the conference. It's really great that we're able to see kind of both teams playing at such a high level in this kind of what could end up being just a final matchup between these two teams for a while.
I got a question. Yeah, that's a great, all great points. And I'm going to build off of your point mentioning Dillon Johnson. If I told you right now, the difference in this game will be 38 yards, do you think that tilts the game one way or another?
I would say yes. It absolutely could, because that could be the difference between a field goal and a touchdown.
Who do you think going into the game holds that 38-yard edge when it comes to stopping the run?
I feel like I know where you're going with this, but I would say that right now, I would say that it's Oregon State that has that edge.
Yep. So Oregon State allows 102 yards per game. Washington's at 140.
Right.
They're both just over 100, but Washington is, again, that 140. It's a little bit more. That's one drive right there. That's the line's now plus one for Washington. So that means Oregon State's now favored in the game. So now you're going in as an underdog in a team that has everything to play for. Not for a Rose Bowl. They're not going to make the playoff or anything like that, because I have a heart. Because Oregon State has what, 2 losses, 1 loss, 2 losses?
Yeah.
Two. Right. Yeah. So they're out of the playoff, but they can absolutely play spoiler, right? Just like I forgot who plays Oregon this weekend, but Arizona State. Arizona State can play spoiler, right? These
right.
When one's a tougher matchup, but I mean, again, Arizona State showed anybody's a tough matchup. But I'm saying, but Arizona State showed Washington's a tough matchup. So, and that's
Absolutely.
At home, right? So it's a matter of Washington can be that for Oregon State. But if Washington wins this game like they did in 2019, 19-7, of course you take the win, but in the eyes of the committee, that's not going to be as good, because that means the offense. Well, you know,
because I hear your point,
but it's like it's good, but I mean, when you put 52 on USC, you put 4. What did they put on Stanford? 40 something.
42.
42. If you can put up 42 on the farm, you got to put up at least 30 plus on Oregon State. I know they have a good defense, and I know it's good, but if you are truly the number one offense passing in the country, and if you are that, these are the games where that has to show up, because the committee can look at Florida State and be like, well, yeah, but they just look better. And I don't agree with it, but I'm saying that's
right.
Do not let that argument happen, and that's how you do that.
So I hear your point, because your point is very valid. I don't disagree with any of that, but where I disagree is I still think that with Oregon State's rank and for where everything that they are right now, they have that for a reason. And going on the road in a really, really tough place to play. As you just said, they've lost 1 home game since 2021. Like that should be taken into account. And on top of that, because I don't even want to just say like, oh, they have a good defense, so if they only score 19 points because they have a good defense. No, this is still a top 10 team in the AP poll. They are the number 10 team for a reason. And that alone should hold enough weight, because if the Huskies are able to win this game, that's their 4th ranked win of the season. And there isn't another team that has 4 ranked wins as of right now, unless that win for Georgia was their 4th, but I'm pretty sure it was their 3rd. But that kind of just adds to Washington's resume, where, yeah, it might not be the prettiest, but they have found a way to win every single game this season. And especially when you are facing, again, a top 10 team, that should weigh heavier than how you won. Because if you win that game on the road in a hostile environment against a top 10 team, that alone should be enough, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I'm more or less. I guess I'm being more. I'm not saying you're not being critical, but I'm just saying like I'm taking the critical approach of, hey, yes, it's a tough matchup, but I mean, I'll make the argument. Penn State, Ohio State. Did
Sure.
that look convincing in any way, shape, or form? No.
Right.
So, if you're Washington and you're trying to make a case as being one of the top 4 teams in the country, I mean, look at Georgia. The only one that was close was Missouri the week before, but Ole Miss was close for a bit, but they put them away at the end. That's what you need to do to Oregon State. You can have that 7-point, 10-point win, and it gets you the win and cool, whatever. It's not just a field goal. But if you can truly start putting teams away, I mean, you put Michigan State away. I'm not saying Michigan State is great, but I'm just saying, like, you've shown you can put Power 5 teams away this year. Now at this point in the season, like, you can squeak by, sure, because all that matters is the win at the end of the day, but you're making your case harder, and you have the talent to not necessarily do that.
So you're right, especially with the win is the win. Okay, because that was kind of the one of the last things I wanted to say here was one of the reasons I'm not like you shouldn't be super concerned. Like, should Washington be in the top 4? Like, you'll know when this show comes out, and we'll talk about it again already. But one of the things that also needs to kind of be discussed in that same vein is one of the teams that is in the top 4 as of right now is still going to lose. There is a 100% chance of that happening before the end of the season. So as long as you are able to take care of business, you cannot be kept out. Like, I feel like that's the biggest thing. Because if Washington is undefeated, and just in this hypothetical scenario, they're undefeated and they win the Pac-12 championship, you cannot keep them out. Because you cannot take a one-loss, like even a one-loss Texas team, if they win out and win the Big 12 championship, you cannot take that team over an undefeated Washington team. That's just malpractice.
Right. Well, because you said the key point there, you beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. Now, the way the Pac-12 gets left out is if Washington loses to Oregon in that game. I could actually see Oregon getting left out depending on the results of the Michigan-Ohio State game. Because if it's a close game, there's nothing in the books that says they can't put 2 Big Ten teams in. And we see it with the SEC. And I mean, even people will make that case for Alabama to get in this year. I guarantee it.
And Texas too. Like, there's going to be a case made for all of these teams.
Yep. So if you're Washington, to your point, just win the games and you control your narrative. We're not getting left out as an undefeated Power 5 champion. I promise you that.
On the other side of this break, we're going to have some fun. We're going to play a fun game of one award, who gets it. The rules are fairly simple, but we'll explain them after a quick message from our friends over at FanDuel. You can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. You've been thinking about joining FanDuel. There is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Lars, you mentioned it. Washington is currently the underdogs. They are 1-point underdogs in this game against Oregon State. So hey, maybe throw some money on that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'm just making sure that I'm correct here. That's the Apple Cup line. That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, this is if there's wow, Jesus. Line it's 2.5 Oregon State.
Interesting. That's interesting.
You have my attention, FanDuel. You have and Oregon State. You have my attention. You already had it. You piqued my interest. Now you have my full attention. Wow, that's over under 63.5. Take the under.
I can see that hitting. My feeling on the over under is life is short. Slam the over.
Arizona State showed me not to do that.
Hey, I didn't say it was a 100% foolproof strategy, though, to be fair. But it's time for a fun game now of one award, who gets it. Lars, do you want to kick us off with where you might have to go? So let's just run through some of the options right here. Where Kalen DeBoer for Coach of the Year, Ryan Grubb for Assistant Coach of the Year, Michael Penix for Heisman, Rome Odunze for the Biletnikoff Award, the Joe Moore Trophy for the best offensive line group to the entire offensive line. And then I feel like the last one you can like really just put in that same discussion right now is because he was named to the semifinal list is the Butkus Award for Edefuan Ulofoshio. If you had to pick one of those, where are you going?
Man, well, I swear I said before in our season preview, Rome Odunze and Biletnikoff when it was my bold prediction. So that I gotta find the receipt on that because I know I said that. I swear, if we were not recording on that, I'm gonna be so mad. But
we definitely were. That's out there somewhere.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Eddie for Butkus for the simple fact of he didn't have to come back this season. He really, not that he didn't have any business, but I think he has certainly played himself into an NFL caliber linebacker. And not that he wasn't already, but being healthy for a full season, leading this defense, kind of just being that key guy. Tape. Yeah, showing that tape, being a captain, everything. I mean, he's such a good kid. He's such a good person that it's like, I'm so glad he's finally able to stay healthy for a year. It's almost like Michael Penix, right? Where couldn't stay healthy in Indiana. It's like, man, but he's such a good kid. Just can you stay healthy so you can have this career that you so deserve? Eddie, I'm not sure if he'll win the Butkus Award, but man, he certainly deserves to be a finalist because if you take Eddie out of this defense, I know he doesn't necessarily have like he has the pick 6 against Cal, but he did something Alfonso Chupatala couldn't do. It's kind of funny that Alfonso saw that and then couldn't replicate it. Anyways, but that's beside the point. But no, Eddie coming back for a 6th year, everything that he's been through, he came in with Peterson, made 2 key forced fumbles on kickoffs as a true redshirt freshman walk-on, earned a scholarship, stuck it through the Lake years, which was not an easy thing to do for anybody.
Especially with all the injuries he had to deal with too in that time period.
And all the injuries. I think that's the key factor. It's all that personal stuff and then the injuries, which are a separate type of personal deal. He is probably more deserving than anybody for an award on this team, not named Michael Penix. I mean, everybody on this team deserves an award, right? I mean, these guys are great kids, great players and all that. But Eddie, especially being in the heart of that defense, I think it's fair to say, Bralen Trice is the engine, Eddie's the heart.
I agree with that. And because this is really tough. And if you had to go one award, like there are so many options that you can give it to. I really do want to give it to Rome with the Biletnikoff. I'm so tempted, but I have to go with the obvious choice here, and I have to go with Penix for Heisman. Yeah. If there's any one, it has to be that one because not only is Mike just as deserving with all the things that he's went through, with all the injuries, the transfer, and having to win the job, and then of course doing so well last year, just fighting through everything that he's had to this year to get to this point. He's just as deserving, but then you have to also look at the other implications, just the much larger implications of what that means for this program, because that would be the first Heisman Trophy in school history. And it would also be the same. I do want to note that it would also be the first if Rome were able to win the Biletnikoff. That would also be the first one in school history, and that would be amazing. But I have to stick with Mike for Heisman here because he, as you said, with Eddie being the heart of the defense, that's what Mike is. He's just injected life into this program because you always have to just like say that for the quarterback, right? That's always just something that's going to come up. And Mike has been such an amazing ambassador for this program. You see all the national NIL deals he's getting, all the attention he's getting, and he is just so deserving of the award through his play and through everything else that he's shown with this team, especially if they are able to, as we talked about over the course of this episode, finish out the regular season undefeated and even get to the college football playoff. However they're able to make that work, a lot of that will be because of Mike Penix. And just with all that being said, I feel like it's a somewhat obvious argument to make, but it still just kind of needs to be said. And with all the other just spectacular things that are taking place on this team, it's really hard to zero in on one guy. But Mike would probably be the one where this is just such a huge achievement for Washington as a whole.
Yeah, well, I think that's I kind of left that one for you because that was
I appreciate it.
It's like if it's not one, that's why I mentioned Eddie and Mike being so relatable. It's because they're basically cut from the same cloth. And I mean, the craziest thing, if you think about it, and here's the thing that makes you have the cliche of it can happen to a better person, but it's also like Mike truly has earned the Heisman Trophy. Like he's played through, it goes to the best player in college football, supposedly, right? Or, some people say the best person on the best team. Well, Washington's been the best team because of Mike Penix. And just like looking at I remember I forgot which game it was one of the first 4 games of the season where it might have been the whichever one Josh Cuevas got the touchdown from Morris, where Michael Penix was asked. Yeah.
Oh no, that was the Tulsa game.
Oh, okay. I knew it was one of the September games, but when he went out of his way, because I remember hearing the question get asked, and it's like, well, if you're Mike, the easiest one is to say all of them, right? The easy, if you're just trying to play a safe, it's like, oh, all the touchdowns are cool because we got guys that are so unique, and he could still play it off that way. But the fact that he's like, it was cool. It was my favorite was seeing Demo throw that touchdown because he's the guy that like not allowed me to win the job, but like I was better than him, and he saw that. These are not Penix's words, but I'm paraphrasing but my glean from that was Mike needed Dillon to help with the locker room. He needed to become tied in just as much as Dillon already was with all of these guys. And when Dillon's like, okay, well, this guy's better than me, but I can learn from him and maybe improve my game to where I can be at his level at some point next season with this offense and everything, and learn from a guy who's been in the offense. It was the perfect way to handle it. I mean, look, Caleb Williams comes from USC. There's no competition for him because it's Caleb Williams. Other quarterbacks transfer. DJ goes to Oregon State. It wasn't easy for him, but it was pretty obvious, right? Penix was obvious, but it was like he couldn't stay healthy, so who knows? And he hasn't missed a game at Washington. Like he hasn't missed he's missed a beat. He's certainly missed a beat, but I think actually because he's missed a beat and stayed on course and hasn't lost this season, it's like he absolutely should win the Heisman. I mean, he's going to get invited. I think is without question at this point. I mean, if he doesn't get invited, I don't even know what we're doing at this point. But he truly deserves to win it because you're going to say, oh, JJ McCarthy. You'll say Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr., I think it's just so hard for a receiver with such good quarterback play this year.
If there's an argument for Marvin Harrison, there needs to be one for Rome Odunze, though.
Yeah. So that's kind of why that canceled out. I great kids, right? But I think if you're looking at it'd be what JJ, Bo, and Mike,
and
of those. Okay, so and maybe not JJ and put in Jaden Daniels, but one of the three. LSU's got a couple of losses this season.
Yeah,
Bo lost to Washington and would lose twice to Washington if Washington wins the Pac-12 championship. And if Washington wins the Pac-12 championship, aside from another Mish Powell pulling a Byron Murphy, it's going to be because of the left arm of Michael Penix. So at that point, to deny him the Heisman would just be disrespectful, flat out.
Couldn't agree with you more. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And if you're new to the channel, hey, welcome. We'd love to have you here. Please, if you like the content, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. Again, like the show, leave us a 5-star review on audio only. If there's any questions that you have, please feel free to leave them in the comments or shoot them to us on Twitter. We try to get back to as many of you as we possibly can. Again, we really appreciate the support. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in, and we will talk to you